Yes, I am well aware, for those of you who are gonna definitely, for sure, let me know in the comments that Death Stranding doesn't have a release date yet. Games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, they don't have release dates, so you can't talk about those games potentially releasing in 2019 until they have release dates. Well, I'm gonna do it anyway. And I wanted to say, first and foremost, the thing that inspired me to create this video is not to create a flame war, once again, which I seem to be very good at doing, but it's actually inspired by my own content that I've created in the past. And I was kind of skimming over my history. And I don't know how many of you know this, I'm sure most of you do. I have really been a Xbox fanboy on this channel for a long time. It's been for a couple years straight. And there was a recurring theme that I noticed throughout the content that I created. And that theme revolved around E3, particularly and specifically for the first half of the year between January and June. It was all this conversation about E3, and essentially what it boiled down to is, hey, wait for E3 because Microsoft is going to come out and they're going to knock it out of the park and they're going to prove everybody wrong, and it's going to make me feel validated. And that's pretty much what it came down to. I'm not saying all my content was that, because that would be an exaggeration, but there's no denying that I created so much content that revolved around E3 and how I was spending more time talking about that than really anything else. And unfortunately for me, even when the games that I saw at E3 eventually released, most of them ended up being a huge letdown. I mean, if I'm being honest, the only game I played the past couple years that Microsoft brought out as a first-party title that didn't completely let me down was Forza Horizon 4. I really did enjoy that game, but it's, if you've played Horizon 3 and Horizon 2, it probably feels like, okay, it's kind of more of the same to an extent. Luckily for me, I didn't really play those games, so Forza Horizon 4 for me felt very fresh. But that's why I wanted to make this video talking about why PlayStation doesn't need to rely on E3 in 2019. And I know it may sound a little bit cocky, and I know that Sony doesn't have that mentality. Sony's not showing up at E3 for very specific reasons. It's not because they think they're better than E3 or because they just don't care about it anymore. I mean, Sean Layden has went on record expressing that he thinks E3 is starting to slowly but surely become a little bit irrelevant, but he made sure to let us know that that doesn't mean they're never going to show up there again. I would definitely expect to see them there in 2020. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. But ever since we heard this announcement, I think it was sometime last year when we officially found out that Sony wasn't going to be at E3, a lot of people have really been kind of back and forth saying they're extremely let down and they're disappointed. And let me say this, it is disappointing. I'm not trying to make it sound like E3 isn't great or I don't enjoy E3. I love E3. I do. And I think it is ultimately disappointing to think that one of the major players, that being Sony, won't be there, because every time we, get ready to watch E3, we're excited for the new announcements. But at the same time, I think most rational people cannot fault Sony for being honest and saying, look, we kind of have our plan in place for the remainder of this generation, and the games that you see out there right now are the games you can expect to get throughout the rest of this generation, and we really don't want to put on a big show and call everybody in and make it seem like it's going to be some big thing and really just end up showing more of the same. Although I would argue, if they were to show new gameplay segments of games like Death Stranding and The Last of Us Part 2, and even Ghost of Tsushima, I would argue that a lot of people can still consider that a very successful E3, but I think most people understand this mentality. If they don't have anything new ready to show, their idea is, well, let's just sit back and wait until we are ready to show it, and I'm fine with that. But the main reason why Sony doesn't need to rely on E3, and this is where I truly feel like, and again, I know that making comments like this, no matter what, and just the title of this video, no matter what, is going to be polarizing, and it's going to create a flame war. It's inevitable. I've just accepted it at this point, but I'm still going to say what I have to say. Microsoft and Sony are pretty much in opposite boats right now, and it's very, very interesting to me where Microsoft, it is good for them. Like, there's no denying that them having E3 to themselves is a great thing because the spotlight's going to be solely on them. And so they are going to, I'm assuming they're going to seize that opportunity because it is a major opportunity that's presenting itself to really kind of attempt to surprise people. But I'm not holding out hope. You guys know this. Like, I'm done waiting. There are some things I'm expecting to see from Microsoft at E3 this year, and I will make a video or maybe a few videos talking about the things I actually am genuinely excited to see. I'm not going to talk about them right now. But overall, I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, just wait till E3. That's when Microsoft's going to really knock it out of the park, because until they truly just show me something, I'm not holding out hope. But Sony and Microsoft are on opposite sides of the fence right now, where I honestly think that Microsoft is really, they need to. It's not even just the position they're in. It's not a desire. It's a need for them to have to rely on E3 to try to really make some forward progress and momentum in terms of getting gamers excited and winning gamers back. And Sony doesn't need to at all. In fact, Sony, in my opinion, has earned the right at this point to be able to sit back and say, we don't want to force an E3 showing because we just don't feel like it's necessary. We're going to save money and we're going to just, kind of hunker down and let the games speak for themselves. And this is where the conversation, it always comes, every time we talk about PlayStation and Xbox, it always comes down to the same things. I know a lot of people consider me some kind of, console fanboy, and I care so much about a piece of plastic, but it's not so much about that. The truth is, the conversation always comes down at the end of the day to one thing, and that is the games. A lot of people think that I just played one Sony game and suddenly I'm just a PlayStation fanboy. No, it's not that. I played a couple of Sony games, some of the highest rated ones, and I found out and discovered for myself that, you know what? These games are no joke, man. When people say that, people have told me in my comment sections over years, like, Xbox's games just can't compete and they don't hold a candle to the stuff that Sony's producing. I honestly thought it was exaggerated, and these people were being hyperbolic about it. And then I experienced them for myself, and I'm still experiencing them. And now I realize that, wow, yeah, that is the truth, man. And so when we think about the games that we know are coming out, we know there's Dreams. Dreams is going to be coming out. I believe they just announced that they're going to have paid early access for that game. For obvious reasons, it's going to have to be early access. And it's easily one of the most unique games, and I've actually been looking into it a little bit more. And it's not a game that I'm necessarily going to jump into myself, but I do find it very intriguing and very interesting, and it's something I will be keeping an eye on. And I know for a fact that there's definitely an audience there. It may not be as big, but the audience is there. So I think Dreams is going to be a great release for Sony this year that fans can look forward to. And then we have Days Gone, which you guys know I'm very excited about, and I'm going to make a couple videos talking about Days Gone before it releases and my thoughts on it and why I think Sony's actually doing a really good job with this game, and why I'm excited for it. So we have those two for sure, and I think we know that Concrete Genie is going to be coming out at some point this year, but the big games such as Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 2, a lot of people are wondering, like, when are these games going to launch? And again, this is why I said in the beginning of my video, people always freak out when I talk about these games in the context of 2019, because if it doesn't have a release date, then it definitely can't be coming out. But I would argue it's extremely likely that at least one of these three games, right, between Death Stranding, Last of Us Part 2, and Ghost of Tsushima, I would argue it's very likely that at least one of these games will launch before the end of this year, because I would be very surprised if they didn't. Now, I would argue, and I may be stretching it here, that Sony could probably still get away with just doing Dreams and Days Gone as their main titles for 2019, and people would still maybe not be nearly as satisfied, but knowing they still have these amazing games to look forward to before the end of the generation, they could probably get away with that. However, I don't think that's what they're going to do, and that's why I don't think Sony or PlayStation fans really honestly care that much that they're not showing up at E3. Again, is it disappointing? Yeah, we love E3. There's no denying that. Most of us love E3. To a lot of people, E3 is starting to really lose its luster, and it's just not as exciting anymore. But I think most of us can agree that we always look forward to E3, and the fact that Sony's not going to be there is definitely disappointing. But does that mean that the year for PlayStation 2019 is going to be disappointing? Absolutely not. I think it's going to be the exact opposite. And I am eagerly anticipating games like Death Stranding and The Last of Us 2, and even to an extent Ghost of Tsushima. But like, if Death Stranding launches this year before the end of the year, that's it, man. Like, that's it for me. You know, I think that's where it'll just be proven. And even with Days Gone, you know, I'm more excited for Days Gone that's coming out in April than anything on Xbox's side right now. Granted, we don't know about too much, but you know, it's going to be Microsoft's job to get me excited for their future projects, and they're going to have to show those projects, and they're going to have to look good. They're going to have to look quality. They're going to have to try to win me back. But right now, I don't think Sony needs to really worry. And I don't think PlayStation, if I'm being honest, I don't mean to speak for all PlayStation fans, and I'm not trying to, but if I had to make an assumption here, I would say that most PlayStation fans are really not concerned at all about Sony not going to E3. I would say most PlayStation fans are looking at the games that we know are coming before the end of this generation between now and the end of 2020, most likely, or mid-2020, and it's looking really, really, really good and really promising, and it almost seems as though, for as amazing as this generation has been so far with games like God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn on PlayStation side, and, you know, even Bloodborne, that the best may, you know, still, it's yet to come for a lot of people. So that's why I honestly believe PlayStation doesn't need to rely on E3 in 2019 to have a potentially very amazing year, maybe one of their best years yet, depending on which games end up releasing before the end of the year. And I was, again, inspired by my own content to talk about this, because I realized now that I'm embracing PlayStation and truly becoming a genuine fan of it, and they won me over with how amazing some of their games are that I've played, that it feels really, really, really good to not have to sit here and say, oh, wait till PlayStation at E3 this year, guys. They're going to really show some awesome stuff. Wait for these games because they're going to be amazing. Like, I genuinely feel so confident when I say something like, just wait till The Last of Us 2 drops. It's going to be a banger. It's going to be possibly the game of the generation. I genuinely feel confident in saying that. And I feel confident saying that because I played The Last of Us, and I know that they have something special here, and Naughty Dog is going to do something incredible with that game. I feel confident in saying that. I feel confident in saying, as a longtime Metal Gear Solid fan, I know what Kojima's capable of. I know his work, and Death Stranding is going to be, even though it's easy to poke fun and make fun of because of, you know, what we've seen of it so far, and it's fun to kind of mess with it a little bit, but I feel confident saying it's going to be an amazing game. Even for those Metal Gear fans who maybe weren't so high on Metal Gear Solid 5 because the story beats weren't, you know, up to what maybe Metal Gear fans would expect. Even the gameplay itself, man, is really good, and I'm just very excited, in case you can't tell, and it just feels really, really nice to actually have amazing games to play, to not feel like I'm waiting on something, and to not feel like there's a really good chance I'm going to be let down and disappointed by the future titles, such as Days Gone, you know, Last of Us and Death Stranding, so on and so forth. Feels good to know that I'm probably not going to be really let down by these games at all. So that's going to do it for the video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. I thought it would make for an interesting topic, an interesting conversation, and I think it will remain relevant probably throughout the entirety of the year, because there's no doubt that the fact that Sony's not going to be E3 is a big talking point within the gaming community. And I'm just speaking for myself, and I'm assuming there's going to be some people who agree with me. There's definitely going to be some people who don't agree with me. And that's why I'm going to ask you at this point to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think that Sony will still have an amazing year, or potentially have an amazing year, even though they're not going to be at E3? Or do you think that it's actually really going to be at their detriment? I will be very interested to see what you have to say. And while you're at it, let me know which PlayStation games you're most looking forward to. And be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave the video a like if you enjoyed it. That really helps. Share it out as well. That also helps incredibly. And hit the bell notification icon on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.